All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham Rukakwadash. I want to give double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. This is your fellow servant, Rokayer from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you with another impromptu lesson. And tonight, I want to tap into a little bit more of this interview from Sean Ryan and Michael Lester. Just before I lay it down tonight, it was on my spirit because they touch on a topic, that is being brought up more and more frequently here in these latter days, which is the topic of Israel and its power and influence over America. All right, in which prophetically we understand, according to the book of Jeremiah, the 49th chapter, that the least of the flock is going to draw them out. All right, the least of the flock being, the Israel, all right, which is inhabited by those small hats, and the drawing out, being of America, all right, Babylon the Great to World War III, all right, that third woe spoken about in Revelation, the 11th chapter, starting at the 13th verse. And right now we're living in the age where the Lord is making Esau bare. Let's get that. There's a great uncovering, that's taking place regarding Esau, Edom. And there's nowhere that he can hide anymore. This is Jeremiah 49:10. It says, "But I have made Esau bare. I have uncovered his secret places, and he shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, and his brethren, and his neighbors, and he is not." All right. And the Lord has been meticulously uncovering and making bare Esau, Edom. All right. The so-called white man, chiefly the elites of Esau, Edom. All right. Your Rockefellers, your DuPonts, your Gettys. All right. Basically your small hats. All right. Those who control and mismanage the resources. The Lord has been meticulously uncovering them. And it's been happening, by way of this unicorn, that the Lord has set up as an avenue to spread truth and to dismantle lies, as well as to spread wickedness. But nowadays, the internet, the unicorn has done a great job, has done heavy lifting regarding the uncovering of Esau, Edom. And now we're living in the day and age to where even, their own Edomite counterparts are starting to see the wickedness, behind Amalek, which is the chief house of the nation of Edom. All right. And Babylon, they're starting to see the wickedness that they perpetuated throughout the four corners of the earth. And they're starting to really see why these nations, are starting to turn against America. They're starting to see why the beast is hating the whore. All right, because America has done nothing but deal treacherously with these other nations, and largely on the behest of their, I don't want to say the word, but fuck it. They say the word in this video, chiefly on the behest of Israel, the state of Israel. All right. Because they're the chief house, Amalek is the chief house, But we're gonna play a couple of minutes of this interview. We're gonna grab a couple of precepts. Lord, when this is edifying unto you elect. All right, but the Lord is making Esau bare, man. And this is the conversation piece that is overtaking the world. I just did a live stream through the Spirit, about how the conversation has changed. And personally, as I've been at the plantation these past couple of weeks, it's really this past month, all of the conversation that I've heard out of Jake's mouth has been regarding prophecy, indirectly regarding prophecy. And I've honestly not heard anything outside of that come out of Jake's mouth, because this is the conversation piece that is overtaking the world. All right. And the making bare of Esau Edom is the talking piece, because this had to happen. The uncovering, the revealing of Esau Edom, had to happen before the great day of the Lord. All right. And we read about that in 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, starting at the 3rd verse. But let's get this.
Port.
Who do you think we're occupied by?
APAC.
A lot of people think that.
The evidence is there. The evidence is all there. It's come on. We send $18 billion a year to Israel. Why? Just ask the question, what do we get out of it?
Nothing.
We get nothing. Are we doing humanitarian work? No, they're charged with genocide. They're killing off Palestinians. Are we helping them survive?
And the reason why, people are able to ask these questions, and seemingly get an answer to these questions, first and foremost, is because of the prophets, excuse me, that the Lord has set up, pursuant to Jeremiah, the 3rd chapter, and the 15th verse, that are according to his heart. Those servants spoken about in Amos, the 3rd chapter, who have the revealing of the secrets that have been contained in the Bible. But another reason, why these people are able to ask these questions now, and are starting to ask these questions now, is because, pursuant to Daniel 12:4, knowledge has increased. Now we're living in an information age to where this Western propaganda it doesn't have a foothold, over the minds of the people anymore, because information is easily accessible at everyone's fingertips. They're no longer able to spin the narrative on what's going on in that land, because there's a live streams, broadcasts being made every single day of the bombings and of the treachery, that is taking place, sanctioned by those small hats, and carried out by Babylon the Great. There's live news feed, nowadays. There's alternative news medias. There's the prophets, first and foremost, who are giving the real of the matter. And now people are able to ask these questions and see, like, hey, this isn't adding up. This isn't making any sense. We've been lied to. And now people are starting to really, and now the divide in Babylon the Great is really starting to widen, man. It's really starting to branch.
Well, they've got a higher standard of living than we do, a longer lifespan than we do, free education, free housing, free health care, but we're sending them money. Why? Ask yourself why a U.S. congressman can wear an Israeli military uniform in congressional chambers. I would think that would be an act of treason. But they did. Nobody said anything. Ask why the Israeli prime minister can bypass the president, fly directly in and speak to our Congress without any other government interaction.
I didn't know that could happen.
Now we shut down that conversation quickly, right? Whenever we try to talk about it, you get harm.
Yeah, and he gets in. Hold on, I gotta skip through a little bit of this because he gets in too much. YouTube will take down this video with a lot of stuff that he's saying, even though it's still up weeks later on this guy's channel. But if we post it, Esau gonna clip that shit.
Judaism. Support another country's expansion. We had Biden come out and say, I am a Zionist. Really? You support another country's expansion over everything, no matter what? Aren't you supposed to be the president of the United States? At least, 40.
That's because, Once again, Amalek is the chief house, but I want to skip to this part. Let's see.
Before that, actually, and again, I'm going to go back to the whole Israeli thing. So Israel was created in our current world by Resolution 181 of the United Nations that said the
Right, and this is another, reason why we know without a shadow of a doubt that those heathens that are in our land today aren't the true Israelites, because they created that state. The Bible speaks about how the Lord will return his people unto that land. This is let's see. Bear with me for a second. Right. This is Isaiah 2 in verse 1. It says, the word that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains. All right, going into governments. And shall be exalted. So the government of the Lord shall be exalted above all governments. It says, in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. And this is prophecy, of the nation of Israel being set on top of all governments on the planet Earth. And as they set on top, it is said that the nation should not learn war anymore. So the fact that we're seeing these atrocities, these wars, these rumors of wars taking place surrounding, that land, with those small hats, lets us know that those aren't the people. The government of the Lord does not reside in that land or amongst those people. All nations aren't flowing unto that land, for understanding, for wisdom. They're separating themselves. They're fighting against it. They're fighting desperately against it. And these are topics that, brothers bring out constantly, constantly. Our elders and apostles have brought out constantly, speaking points, that we've heard that are now starting to manifest. People are starting to ask questions now because nothing's adding up anymore. Everything that Esau's saying doesn't add up. He's not the people. All right, he established that state in which what he was talking about with Resolution 181. Did a Google search on what Resolution 181 is. It says the United Nations General Assembly, Resolution 181, adopted on November 29, 1947, recommended partitioning the British Mandate of Palestine into separate Usaid and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international control. It says it passed with 33 votes in favor, 13 against, which those numbers are spiritual. 33, 13, it's always the same shit. But it says the partitioning plan. The plan was proposed dividing the land into a state, in which, according to prophecy, it wouldn't be a ish state. It would just be the government of Yahweh Shai, Yahweh Bahashum Yahweh Shai, that will be set, that will be established upon the top of the mountains, from a great judgment. But, we see what they're doing now. It says, an Arab state, approximately 43% of the land, with Jerusalem as a corpus separatum under UN administration. So that's what the resolution 181 that he's speaking about is. And we also know that they established, the state of Israel, which he's going to go on to state through the Balfour Declaration in 1948.
The Israeli people should have a homeland of their own. Many people know that fact. What they don't know is that same Resolution 181 said, you may not displace people that already live there. It didn't say.
And I want to, you have to understand that this is a part of the Lord making Esau bare, because this information was not accessible 30 years ago, 10 years ago. Nobody knew about this until our elders apostles and their elders apostles brought these things out through the Spirit of the Lord. Nobody knew about this. This information was hidden. It was hidden behind archives, behind paywalls, secret councils. Nobody understood, this information, knew this information, let alone understood it until the prophets came on the scene. Nobody was asking these questions. This is a product of Esau being made bare.
You get to have a state that is only Jewish and everybody else has to leave, or you get to expel them. It also said there will be a Palestinian state. There will be an Israeli state and a Palestinian state. It said that. Resolution 181. That was passed in November of 1947.
In which we've seen that Palestine got the short end of the stick in that deal, as we read, with 43% of the land supposedly. And these are heathens fighting over our inheritance. At the end of the day, none of them belong in that land. All of them niggas need to kick rocks. That's our inheritance, in which we're going to receive, Lord willing, after the Lord returns, man. Right now it has to be cleansed. And the only way it's going to be cleansed is through that thermonuclear fire, that the Lord is getting ready to send in the midst of World War III. The Lord is getting ready to cleanse that land with fire, because none of them niggas belong there.
In 1948, Israel declared itself a distinct, free, and new nation. You know how government works. When somebody says something and you want a resolution or you want to do something, how long does that take in government?
Years.
Could be. Israel declared themselves independent. President Truman recognized them 7 minutes later. 7 minutes. At the Balfour Agreement started. And of course, you can go back before that, the Balfour Agreement.
What's that?
Sykes-Picot. So there were a couple of people.
This is going on during World War II.
Oh, yeah, before. Well before. Well before. So Theodor Herzl wrote a paper, a treatise, called Der Judenstaat in German, and it means the Jewish state. And he said the Jewish people should have their own state. They should be allowed, to not be under any other state, because we should be our own people, right? He petitioned the British government and said, hey, we need to make a place for the Jews. Lord Balfour, who was, I forgot his position, but he was a lord in the government, wrote a letter that said, the British government recognizes that the Jewish people should have their own state. Well, the British government didn't actually say it. Lord Balfour did, but the British didn't want to be embarrassed and say we're going to go against one of our own lords, so they didn't refute it. Herzl and some others took this and then petitioned the League of Nations and said we should be our own state. They said, well, we don't recognize you yet, right? After World War II, feeling a lot of guilt, they again pulled up the Balfour letter and said, you guys said we should get our own state. You need to do something. After World War II, we're carving up all the land, right? Sykes and Picot, the two people that were assigned to kind of figure everything out, said, well, we'll give this to Israel. We'll give the Hashemite kingdom over here to this brother who helped us fight the Ottomans, and then we'll carve out this part over here. We'll call that the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. We'll make the rest of Palestine a mandatory Palestine that we'll continue to manage. And they divvied everything up pretty much on the back of a napkin. There was not a lot of thought. They drew lines and said, what do you think about this? Yeah, okay, we'll do that. That was Sykes-Picot. That basically just...
And now, I'm going to just cut it there. Now we're at the end of Esau's enterprise. Now we're at the end of Esau's wet dream, to where this greater Israel project is coming to an end, man. The Lord isn't going to allow Esau to fulfill his wildest desire. This is it, man. This is it. This is inquisition being made upon the counsels of the ungodly. This is Esau being made bare. This is prophecy in motion. This is this least of the flock. And as we see this whole ordeal with Iran, all right, and what's taking place, the strikes, that Iran have taken back, on these different American bases, the backing that Iran is receiving from Russia and China, Russia being that guardian to these nations who were at one time insignificant, but now they have power, they have a say-so, because now every one of these nations is armed with nuclear capability, and they receive that capability from the guard that is Russia, which is prophetic. Right now, really, in the grand scheme of things, Israel and America are alone on the world stage. That separation is getting wider and wider between America and its allies. And eventually, the only allies America is going to have is with the small hats. And the small hats are going to draw them out into their destruction. We are witnessing this right now. We're witnessing this right now. And it's a very beautiful thing to behold, man. With that being said, Lord, I want to edify unto you elect. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Bahashim, Rokakwadash, and double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. Shalom. Stay up.